Hey y'all, welcome to the Moving with Millennials podcast with your favorite millennial realtors.
We are 4 top producing agents in the DFW area, and we are ready to share the good, bad, and the real life of real estate.
Whether you're thinking about getting into real estate, already an agent, or just curious about what your agent really does, join us.
Tune in every Wednesday to see what it's really like to be on this side of the transaction.
Hey y'all, welcome to this week's episode of Moving with Millennials. We have a special guest for you today. I'm going to introduce him here in a minute, but today's topic is going to be all about the spooky side of real estate, which is right now a hot topic is interest rates. And so we brought in a lender of ours, because who better to talk to about interest rates than a lender? So I want to introduce you to Daniel Anderson. Daniel, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us what company you're with, and a little bit about you.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Daniel Anderson. I'm with Integrity Mortgage. First off, thanks for having me on this morning.
Of course.
Grew up kind of in Georgetown, just north of Austin. Been in the DFW area, though, for about 15 years. Love pretty much everything outdoors, and I'm in the industry for about 10 years now.
Yeah, you and Jordan, which Jordan is another agent at our market center. That's his wife. You guys do a lot of disc golf?
Yep.
Yeah.
We kind of got into that recently. Yeah. So that's been new for me, and I love it. It kind of just picked it up randomly, and I got a basket in my backyard now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
it's just such like, it's not like a random sport, but it's such like no one really does disc golf, but I see you guys do it all the time in your stories, and I'm like, that's such a cool little hobby. Yeah. I love it. Well, thank you for coming on with us. So thank you again. So let's talk about...
I'm going to interrupt you. Just to let listeners know, you will not hear Maggie or Brandie's voice today.
Oh, yes.
We are still on kind of like the craziness of this season. In order to keep things moving forward, you may hear some episodes where there's just maybe one of us, 2 of us, 3 of us, whatever it may be. But of course, we miss them, and we'll see them soon.
Yeah, and you may hear a baby in the background, too, because I have Chandler with me today.
Special guest Chandler.
Yeah, but she's just chilling in her car seat, so she's good. Okay, so let's talk about the spooky stuff. Let's talk about interest rates. So what are you seeing over, I guess, the last 2 years? I've been kind of more of the hot topic with interest rates. What have you seen over the last 2 years happening with rates and compared to what you're seeing in today's market?
Well, I mean, obviously, in COVID times, they hit an all-time low, basically. So if you want me to kind of go back a little bit further.
Yes.
We don't really need to be too freaked out. Everyone's freaking out about these rates right now. But honestly, the 7s where we're at right now and the high 6s, like if you go back in time, early 2000s, just 20 years ago, 2001 to 2003, kind of in that time frame, we were looking at those exact same rates then. No one was even concerned or blinking an eye. We've kind of all got fixated and used to these just ridiculously low rates for the past couple of years that now we're kind of freaking out when we're seeing it just kind of go back up to what it's been historically for years. Obviously in the Carter times, in the late 80s, it was like, 16, 18%.
Right. Yeah.
And that was really crazy. But obviously, it's basically, we saw 7s and 6s and stuff like that, early 2000s. And then, you had 08 happen. And then after 08, it kind of dropped a little bit into, the 5s or so after the crash. And then basically in kind of 2019 is when we kind of saw it dip down a little bit more, even into, the 3s. Before that, it was kind of in the 4s a little bit. And then COVID happened, obviously bottomed out, went into the 2s. The reason why that happened is because they were using that to stimulate the economy. So when COVID happened, they needed, the economy to keep moving. So they dropped rates even more, keep everything going. And then now, obviously, we're dealing with inflation and everything. So to combat that, we're seeing a spike, obviously in rates, but really nothing to be concerned about.
Right? Yeah.
I think, too, the important thing to really take away from that is that the 2s and 3s were artificial. They were not a natural result of our economy. They were something that were artificially done in order to help the economy along.
Absolutely.
Just like, in a way, the high 6s and 7s that we have right now are also artificial, like you said, to combat inflation.
Yep.
So we're not really back at a normal. We weren't at a normal number during COVID, and we're not really at what our baseline should be back at right now because, again, we're battling inflation. So we're really still...
Yeah, it still hasn't even stabilized.
Right. Yeah. So we're not at where we'll be for a while. We're still battling inflation.
Yeah, which I don't think I said it, but the name of this podcast is actually Don't Be Spooked by the Interest Rates, because we don't want people, and that's why we wanted to bring you on, is really everyone is spooked out by them thinking, oh my gosh, they're high, when reality, like you said, if we look at the previous historic years, we're right where we kind of in a normal.
We've seen this plenty of times.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think what's spooked people actually probably the most is how quickly they changed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if we were back in 2019, I do remember they were like probably like at the 4s. I had some maybe clients closing around 5 or so.
Yeah.
If they would have gradually over the next couple of years gone up to the 6 range, we wouldn't have been so spooked by it.
No.
But because it dropped, it went from a 2% rate
It's like
up to a 6
and like a
which
week.
feels like overnight. Yeah.
We basically just kind of got used to these historic lows.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and we kind of,
Yeah. So, and then let's talk about the 2008 fiasco. Only because if you know a little bit about it, just because I feel like that's what people are worried about with the rates too. Is like the market's gonna crash. And Jake and I and Maggie and Brandie, we've had other podcasts where we talk about the market and all that kind of stuff, and we don't think it's gonna crash. Industry people don't think it's gonna crash. Economists don't think it's going to crash. Nowhere in there is it are people saying crash other than probably the media, spooking people. And so with the rates where they're at, I mean, how do you see that affecting our market?
No, I definitely don't see a crash in the market. Everyone is predicting that crash. I definitely don't see it. If you were to go buy, a couple of years ago, you could have bought a house, for $300,000. And if you were going to go try to buy that house now, and it's $450,000, and then all of a sudden like the sellers and the real estate agents are like, well, okay, we're not getting anything, maybe we should drop the price a little bit, maybe we should drop to like $440 or $430. Some might say they're waiting for that. Well, that's not a crash.
Right.
It's still a significant increase in your property value and everything like that. Right. That's just a correction, as you just mentioned. Yeah, so that's not a crash. I like that word,
correction. Yeah. And that really is, I mean, not interest rates aside, I agree with you, because even when the market did crash, and I remind people when they, come at me with that objective, when the market did crash in 2008, prices dropped probably about 30% on average, which is not, I mean, you go back 30% from where our prices are at today, we're still a little ahead of pre-COVID pricing.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like, worst case scenario, you're still fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. Cool. And then I know no one can really predict like what will happen with the rates, but what are you hearing, or what do you think like where we're headed like with the current rates?
So currently right now, I'm hearing, and from a lot of experts in the industry, I'm actually hearing some really good news, some promising news. We're kind of going through this last quarter right now is about as tough as it's going to get, is what everyone is speculating. We're actually speculating that literally like as soon as first quarter to even second quarter of next year of 2023, we're going to start to see everything start to correct and to kind of start drop back down a little bit, and we might be seeing 5s by March of 2023.
Okay.
So really we just kind of right now this is nothing really to be worried about. And we're going to be right back on track, and kind of that market's going to stabilize here shortly.
Perfect. So what kind of conversations are you having with clients then, if they're like, well, if the market, should we wait basically until March when they think the rates are going to go down, or should we go ahead? You know what I'm saying? Like
any time you can buy, anytime you're ready to buy, because the whole point is, you got to get your foot in the door. You got to start building that equity, and if you wait, you're just doing what everybody else is doing. Like right now would be perfect in my opinion, because you don't have the competition of going up with 30, 40 offers, 20 offers. So if you can get in now, against like 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 offers, you got a much better chance of getting in now if you can. And then just refinance, next year. But you got that dream house that you wanted, and you've already been building that equity for, a year or a couple months or so.
Right. That's a really solid point, because when rates, if they drop back into the 4s, all those people that we had that left,
they're just gonna rush.
Stopped looking,
now,
it's going to be like a gold rush kind of deal again, and you are suddenly going to be competing against lots of multiple offers. And whereas like right now, you may have that higher rate, but you're going to have more negotiation power right now. I mean, like listings, I had one that just did multiple offers the other day, but in reality, a lot of the listings, you're going to be able to get, maybe some closing costs, or you're going to be able to negotiate price, or you're going to get, just other terms that are going to be able to be more so in your favor as a buyer. Whereas if you wait, you may have a lower rate later, but you're going to be competing and maybe not be able to negotiate.
Right.
So it does make sense to kind of get your, like you said, buy it whenever you can afford to, and then if a more favorable rate does come down the line, then you can always refinance, because you already purchased with a better negotiation power.
Yeah, absolutely. And Daniel, I want to get your thoughts on this, but one of the things that Jake brought up one time, kind of a strategy that he's going with, because people were having to pay like $50,000. I mean, I had someone pay $100,000 over appraisal
it was crazy.
in the crazy market. Well, obviously we're not up against these multiple offers anymore. So what they could be doing is, instead of paying $100,000 over asking, they could be using that money to buy down the rates. And
absolutely.
so I kind of wanted to see what you thought on that kind of strategy that buyers could be doing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually just implemented a new program. It's called a 2-1 buy down program. So essentially, let's say if a house is $500,000, well, instead of going in there and offering, $480,000 or $490,000, just a little bit below listing price, you can go into the seller and be like, hey, I'm going to give you that full $500,000, but go ahead and give me a $10,000 in seller concessions. And essentially what they're going to do is they're going to pay for you to buy down that rate.
Right.
And the 2-1 buy down program, the really cool thing about it is it basically it's kind of like an escrow account in a sense. So when they give you that $10,000, it'll go into a separate account. And basically, every single month when you make your payment, you actually get, so let's say if the rate was at 7% today, you would actually get a rate around like 5.5, which is phenomenal. People would be like jaws dropping over this. And what it does is that extra money will go into this account, and then it'll pay, the bank will essentially, it's kind of like a servicer, they'll pay out the additional little bit every month of what the payment should be right now. And then, so then next year, and they do this for 3 years. So then basically the first 2 years, you get let me retract here. So the very first year, you'd get 2 points below.
Yeah.
And they would be paying the difference. The second year would get 1 point below, and they'd be paying a little bit less, a little bit less obviously, but they'd be paying that difference still. And then the third year, you're back at your fixed rate essentially, which would be like the 7%. But by then, we're already speculating rates will be.
You can refi.
Yeah, you should be able to refi before even then. And the cool thing about that is you didn't even have to pay to buy down that point or anything like that. So it's kind of a win all around.
Yeah.
And the sellers still get a great deal on their house as well.
And maybe you said this and I just missed it, but you said the seller has to pay that.
Yeah,
right?
It can't be the buyer. So it could be the lender, the seller, or the real estate agent. It could be all of the seller. You can split it all up, but as long as it's just not the buyer. It just can't be the buyer.
And I was thinking that because that actually may be a good strategy for sellers right now to offer something like this for their client or for their buyers.
Absolutely.
Because sellers are having a little bit harder time to sell right now.
Absolutely.
It is yes and no. I think as long as you, as a listing agent, can effectively communicate that to a buyer's agent, because we actually did that on one of my listings, and so many of the buyer's agents were like, well, I don't really know how much of a difference that's going to make for my client. And I'm like, well, call my lender. It's like, talk to your lender, call my lender, like whatever language I need to put this in for you that you can understand it. I think so many buyer's agents, or agents in general, because that's a new thing that we haven't really dealt with before, so many haven't really had the chance to be educated on it just yet.
Yeah.
So if you're going to use it as a kind of like a marketing thing, I think you should probably show actual numbers as examples, where it's like current average rate is this. If you bought your rate down to this is the difference in payment it would be.
Yeah.
And it's like if we offered this amount of money, it would get your rate down to this.
That's a great
point.
So
I think you have to put it in real numbers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jake.
I just was going to ask, so we're talking a lot about rates. So where, as a lender, where or what sites do you use to kind of look at the rates?
Okay. So basically, I've got obviously a platform where I can go in there and I can see. So basically, I'm a correspondent, okay, which is basically a hybrid between a bank and a broker. So we can fund our own loans and such like that. We have our own line of warehouse. We have our own money, but we're a broker in the sense that we can shop around. So I've got basically a list of investors and a portal I can go into where I can see about 30 different investors immediately. And I can kind of go through and see where everyone's at. But obviously not everyone can see that.
Right.
I can only see that. So for a lot of my clients, if they're hearing, the things on the radios where it just seems crazy to me sometimes what they can get away with saying. But
as low as.
Yeah, all those promotional things that they say. Well, I always tell my clients, hey, go to FreddieMac.com. That's the simplest way to do it. I mean, that's the secondary market right there. So if you go to Freddie Mac, you can see right on their front page, you just scroll down a little bit, and I believe as today, this morning, it's a 6.92, and what people don't even realize is it says it's 6.92, but right below that, that's with pretty much a point as well.
Okay.
So really, you're kind of in the 7.5, 7.325, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's a good kind of check and balance. So anytime someone's hearing some false information, I like to kind of, hey, here's what's
that's
really...
probably with the perfect credit score.
Here's what they really are. And of course, that's perfect credit, and that's everything, A-plus borrowers for sure.
Yeah, so actually, going off of that, what all affects a buyer's interest rate?
Obviously, credit's huge. Because that pretty much tells everything. Are you responsible? Are you going to pay this back? So credit's like one of the biggest things. Another big thing is, that will help a little bit. How much are you putting down? Are you putting 5% down? Are you doing an FHA 3.5? FHA will help your rates a little bit. It's a cool little program. But essentially, credit's the biggest, and then obviously how much you're putting down. If you're putting down 20%, that'll help a little bit. If you're putting down 25%. So stuff like that. But basically, credit's the biggest thing.
Credit,
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, and then I feel like I had another question, but of course then it just blanked. I do want to talk about adjustable rates.
Yep.
Because I'm not helping them buy the house because they're buying in another part of the state where I don't service. They actually called me just for my expertise or just to ask me, I guess they're buying new construction. So when they first went under contract in January, the rates, I don't know, were probably at like 3%, something like that. Now they're being quoted like a 6-7%. All of a sudden they can't afford their, payment anymore.
Yeah.
So the lender's throwing at them the option of an adjustable rate where they could basically have an adjustable rate at 4% for 7 years. And then from there it would change. And I told them, I've only done a handful of adjustable rates and it's really more just for investors. So I don't know if we're seeing that more just on the lending side with the typical homeowner or what your thoughts are.
I've definitely seen it been brought up a lot more. People were definitely more intrigued and curious about the adjustable rates. However, I haven't had a lot of people really just jump on them because, after you do want to make sure whatever adjustable rate you're getting, you do want to at least either refi or plan on selling that house before
it comes up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because when it does adjust, it's going to adjust to the current market.
Right.
So, going back to the 2-1 down, 2-1 buy down program. The cool thing about that is that actually, when you get to that last year, it's going to stay fixed at what it is today.
What you
signed
so
on. If someone were to come at me now and ask me about it, I would actually just steer them to the 2-1 buy down program. In my opinion, that's actually pretty nice right now because you'll be fixed at the end of it. Worst case scenario, in 3 years, if the rates went up and up and up,
you're still fixed.
You're still going to be fixed at that third year at the 7, and you got a good rate the first 2 years. Whereas an adjustable rate, once you get to that end, if we're in the 10s or something, that's not going to be that great.
Right. Or you said, or you were saying even if in 3 years when that rate comes up, say the rates are lower than what you had at a fixed rate, you can always refinance.
Of course. Refinance is always an option.
Are there any pieces to either the adjustable rate or that 2-1 that they should, I guess, not be look out for, but make sure they can make sure that they can refinance, make sure there's no penalties, that kind of thing? Is there anything they should be asking their lenders about?
The biggest thing is, what works best for you and your family? What is this house to you? For instance, I feel like ARMs are great for military people, for instance, because they might move around a lot. You might be on a base, for only a couple of years, and then you're going to get shipped somewhere else. The biggest thing is, just if you're going to do an adjustable rate, they're great, but just make sure that it's going to work for you, and that if this is your forever home, just make sure you're going to refinance. Before
it comes up.
Yeah, before it comes up, where you're going to have to start paying that higher rate. But it's nothing really too much to worry about there.
I think people get caught up in the ARMs or the adjustable rate mortgages just because of 2008, but I don't think lenders were as open about the terms. People thought, oh, I got this great rate, and then all of a sudden they realized, wait, why did my rate go up? They weren't even explained that it would adjust.
Yeah, and back to your point earlier about the market crashing, people thinking about, the market's going to crash again and everything like that. Back in, 2008 when it did, anybody can pretty much it was kind of like buying a car. You could go in and just, here's my income, and here's, my score, and they didn't really even double check everything. They're like, they would, but it's nothing like what it was now. There's so many more regulations in now to where it's so much more harder to borrow money. Then anybody could have borrowed money, and that ended up being a massive problem and the huge issue, which is why people weren't informed of what was going on. People were getting approved that shouldn't have been approved and had no business being approved. They're buying multiple homes, and then of course then all of a sudden people can't make their payments, of course.
Right.
Whereas Now there's so many more regulations put in place. It's so much harder to borrow money. So that's another thing that's going to prevent this market from crashing. Is all these regulations now.
Yeah.
I think too, we didn't even say this word, but I think a lot of times when people think of crash, they also think of the word foreclosure. I think it's really important to note that the average homeowner has so much more equity in their home now than they did back then.
Absolutely.
A lot of people have negative equity in their home, which is really what led to the foreclosures.
Right.
We're not anywhere near that right now.
Nothing like that.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
That's one of the big factors.
For sure.
Well, cool. Well, was there anything else that you want people to know about the rates or about you or lending right now?
Don't be scared. It's if you can afford, it's always a great time to buy. There's always the option of refinancing.
Right.
You know, it's nothing to be freaked out about. Even if, like I said, and even if that happened in 6 to 8 months, if it drops back down, why wait till then?
Right.
Because if you do, now you're going to be in the rat race with everyone else.
Absolutely.
And you're going to be in that competition with everyone else. Whereas you could have just bought now when it's nice, easy. It's kind of calming, like right now. And then you can just refinance, in a year or so.
Right. And ultimately, it's a gamble to wait because that's what they're projected to be. But as we've seen because of COVID, because of the war in Ukraine, it's like so many other factors can happen that affect the global economy, which then really affect interest rates.
Absolutely.
So that is it's a gamble because we don't know, again, another war could happen tomorrow, or there's so many other factors.
Nobody has a crystal ball.
Exactly. So it's like if you can afford it now, I always tell people that same thing. It's like whenever you can afford it is when you should make it happen. And if financing changes in the future or rates change, and it's gonna be better for you to refinance later, at least you have that option. Versus you may wait and something may drastically change rates, and then you may not be able to buy, and you're like, oh well, 6 months ago I could have. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, buying a house is always a great way to build equity. I mean, it's really what gives the middle class power.
Right.
It's really what allows the middle class to kind of keep going and leveling up and getting that bigger home. Because you've lived in that first home for 5 years and I've never in my life have I seen homes just depreciating, over time. Like it's just something that doesn't happen. There's only so much land out there. It's not getting made more, so there's only,
What's that quote? I forgot who it was.
Buy dirt.
Buy dirt.
They're not making any more of it.
Yeah, they're not making any more of it. Exactly.
So true.
So it's never a bad time. You're always going to have a great investment. I mean, unless you were like, in Florida and bought on a sinkhole. It's just that would just be terrible. I feel really bad if that ever happened to anybody. But you're not gonna have that happen. The odds of that,
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely.
This has been a great episode. I've learned a lot too. That's
Thank
why
you
I
guys
was
for
love to
having
have.
me.
Of course.
Yeah. Well, guys, we're gonna tag Daniel's Instagram on here as well, so you guys go follow him. If you do need anybody and you're thinking about buying, please give Daniel a call. He's happy to walk you through all the programs he's mentioning. Run numbers for you. He works with a lot of my clients, so I already know he's going to do a great job. So thank you again, Daniel.
Absolutely.
We look forward to having you hopefully on another episode one day.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, guys.